You say you haven't been the same since you had your little crash, but you might feel better if they gave you some cash. The more I think about it, old Billy was right. Let's kill all the lawyers, kill them tonight. You don't want to work, you want.
Here we go, another day.
One more day in paradise, John Mark Griffin. I'm C. Mark.
I'm John Mark.
And this is,
Two Marks, one Mike.
and today we're going to be covering three topics of the next two or three podcasts. What to do at the accident scene if you're involved in an accident. Next week we'll talk about the importance of seeking medical treatment. And the third podcast will be on the importance of hiring a five-star law firm that specializes in this sort of injury. But today we're talking about what to do if you're involved in an accident. So John Mark, you're driving down Brainerd Road, you're at a red light, and someone hits you from behind.
You know, the new changes in procedures that the Chattanooga Police Department are employing as of January 1, and some other police departments across the state and across the country.
Knoxville, Atlanta.
These accidents are treated differently depending upon what has occurred in the accident.
The severity of the accident.
Exactly. Or whether somebody is injured in a smaller accident, or whether a car is immovable, even if there's not a whole lot of damage. And sometimes a fender can be bent in to where it rubs against a tire and you can't move those things. Or you have somebody that may be uncooperative at the scene in exchanging information. So depending upon the type of occurrence,
Right.
You may have to take steps to get the police out.
And the most important document that a client can bring us is the accident, is a crash report. It's a crash report that it is put together by the police department when they get there to investigate the scene of the accident.
Now, the way they've set it up now is if there's a crash and nobody's hurt at the scene, nobody's saying that they're hurt at the scene, the police are not going to show up. If the cars can be moved and nobody's injured, the police are not going to show up. Now, there's a requirement to still call it in,
Right.
but if somebody's not injured, somebody's not hurt, at least as reported at the scene,
Right.
and the cars can be moved, they're not going to show
Sure.
up. So, what would you do, C.
Well-
Mark,
well-
if that happens at the scene?
It's still important to get the same information that the police officer would get at the accident scene. Number one, the other driver's license. You know, it's very important that you see the other driver's license and make sure it's a valid license, and I would take a picture of it using your phone.
Correct.
Now, if the other driver that caused the accident refuses to give the license to you to look at, call the law.
Yes, that's one of the things that these procedures now have is basically what has to happen is both parties have to agree there's no injuries.
Right.
And then both parties have to exchange information.
Yes.
And if they don't do that, they're basically creating a disturbance.
Absolutely.
If there's a disturbance, not about whether there's only an injury, but disturbance about exchanging information, exchanging insurance information, exchanging registration information, exchanging driver's license information, call the police and report the disturbance.
So number one piece of information is the driver's license of the other driver. Just as important is the insurance card. Under Tennessee law, you're supposed to have your insurance card in your dashboard, and certainly in your billfold, to show the other driver that you have proof of insurance. If the other driver, especially the one that caused the accident, refuses to show you his insurance card, call the law.
There's some other things that you could do too as well, even if people are being compliant and exchanging information. If it's safe where you can photograph the vehicles before they're moved,
Right.
photograph the vehicles as they're positioned on the roadway. Also photograph the license tag
Perfect
of
example.
the other vehicle.
Right.
And the reason being is that can provide some valuable information as to ownership of the vehicle.
Right.
Because the driver's not always the owner, as
That's
you know.
right. That's a good point. That's a good point. So if you're involved in an accident where the vehicles are drivable and there's not any apparent injuries, you want to take a picture of the driver's license, take a picture of the insurance card, and take a picture of the tag number. If the other driver refuses any of those requests, which they should comply with those requests, you can call the law, because it's very important to have that information, because if you didn't cause the wreck, you want the other driver's insurance to pay for your car. You want the other driver's insurance to pay for your rental. You want the other driver's insurance to pay for your medical treatment. With that information, you're headed straight to court,
Right.
to court. And that information gives the lawyer the opportunity to reach out to the other driver's insurance and resolve the matter for a fair amount of money without going to court. We don't want to go to court. We don't want to sue anybody. We want to make sure the insurance company does what's right and pays what is fair.
You know, a consequence of not getting that other information where you can utilize it is you may have to pay for your own rental car. You know, sometimes you have
Absolutely.
insurance, but you don't have rental car
Right.
coverage, and if you're relying
Right.
on your own coverage,
Right.
you have to pay for your own rental car. You're also gonna be out your deductible, and those can be very, very expensive depending on the type of policy you have. But see, Mark, what about the situation where, you believe you may be injured, but you're able to drive your car away, but you may believe that your neck's bothering you, your back's bothering you, or you think that you may have sustained some sort of injury, even though you're able to leave the scene? What should you do?
If you call the law. I mean, if you think you're hurt at the accident site, you call the law. You know, because if you have a headache after the impact, it's going to be 10 times that way the following day. So get it checked out quickly as soon as possible, and you call the law once again, because that means that it's even more important to get the insurance information. It's even more important to get the driver's license information. It's even more important to get the ownership of the car information, because you are going to be incurring medical charges that are not your responsibility.
You know, so Mark, another reason why that's important is you're in compliance with the law. If there's an injury at the scene,
Right.
You're supposed to call the law to come to the scene.
Right.
If you can't agree there's no injury, you're not supposed to leave the scene. If you leave the scene when there's an injury, guess what? Misdemeanor charge.
Oh, absolutely.
It's a potential criminal
Absolutely.
charge. So we get a little further down the road. What if you have a situation where the cars are immovable, you can't get them off the roadway, and you're obstructing traffic, even though you don't believe you have an injury, you agree that nobody's injured. What do you do at that point?
You call the law.
You absolutely
You
call it.
call the law, you get them there to direct traffic, to prevent future wrecks, or after your wreck, you don't want more wrecks caused by your wreck, so you get the law there to direct traffic and take care of, and investigate the scene. You know, you should take an opportunity to call the law any chance you have, because you want documentation of what happened, especially if you are in the right and the other driver is the one that caused the accident.
You know, while we're all human, we know one thing the police department has done a great job with over the years. That is, when there has been a crash at the scene here in town, when the police department gets there, they do a pretty good job of doing an investigation.
Right.
They take statements immediately from the drivers, any potential witnesses. They document where the vehicles
Right.
are on the roadway. They've done a very, very good job. And that is something that potentially is not going to happen
Right.
under these
I know,
new
yeah.
regulations or new procedures that the Chattanooga Police Department is following.
It definitely puts the burden, you know, on the individuals that are involved in the wreck and nobody else to actually be proactive and do what's necessary to document the claim.
Now, another scenario which is obvious, there's a crash with obvious injuries. That's where there's not going to be any agreement that nobody is injured.
Right.
You know, somebody's got a laceration to their
Yeah,
forehead
right.
or some visible injury. Obviously, in a situation like that, the police are going to show up.
They're gonna show up.
Now, keep in mind this too. Just because you don't think you need an ambulance, that you think you can get home, that does not mean you're not injured.
Right.
And to comply with the law, and to comply with what the police department is trying to put in place,
Yeah.
if there's an injury,
Yeah, well, you
however
know,
small or large,
what's gonna happen?
they should be there.
Yeah, and the police officer will show up if you think you're hurt, you got a headache now, you know, and they'll ask you, do you think you need an ambulance? And you can say, no, I'll drive to myself to the ER when I go home and, you know, check with my husband. So that's no problem at all. But if you think you're hurt, you know, call the police. They may, you know, they might ask you, do you think you need an ambulance? You can still say, no, I can get myself to the ER or get checked out, you know, at the PCP, but primary care physician. But if you feel like you're hurt, better safe than sorry. Get the law enforcement there to document really how the crash occurred.
There's one other situation where we have to be aware of. You could be the driver that is not at fault.
Mhm.
And if the at-fault driver is injured, that's a scenario where the police should also come to the
Yeah,
scene.
right.
Because remember, it requires everybody involved in that accident, not just the
Right.
drivers, but passengers, both drivers, passengers in any of the vehicles. If anybody in that crash is hurt, the police need to come to the
Right.
scene, whether you're
Yeah.
at fault or not. So to comply with the law and comply with the procedures the police department have in place here, you need to call the police.
Right. call the police, have them investigate the accident, get a police report. Next podcast, we'll be talking about, what to do after the accident if you think you're hurt and when to seek medical treatment. We'll talk to you then. This has been
2 Marks, 1 Mike.
Have a good weekend.
Thank you, bud.
Get